Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Chris Giles, and I'm the Technical Director of Havilah Resources. I'm very pleased today to have the opportunity on this AMEC online investor briefing platform to present to you Havilah's copper credentials. I think most observers would agree that the outlook for copper is extremely favourable, and it really boils down to two reasons. Firstly, all the new uses for copper in the world, especially with the renewable energy push. And secondly, the fact that the monster copper deposits, which have been the mainstay of supply for decades, are waning. They're past their peak in many cases, particularly the big deposits in South America. And the copper resources are not being replaced at a sufficiently high rate to maintain the supply. So against that background, I'd like to give you today 5 reasons why Havilah is very well positioned to benefit from this copper outlook situation. And the first reason is the favourable location, which I'll go into in more detail in the next slide. The second reason is we have 2 substantial copper projects with a large combined copper, gold and cobalt resource inventory, as shown below, over 1.3 million tonnes of copper, over 3.2 million ounces of gold and over 43,000 tonnes of cobalt. Third reason, the Kalkaroo mining development, which is our flagship project, is planned to commence in 2022. Fourth reason, there is appreciable upside wherever you look in the expansion of the existing resources, new discoveries in the regional surrounding area, and additional revenue from other metals like cobalt, rare earths, and moly. And the fifth and final and important reason for investors is that Havilah has the highest leverage to copper as compared to its ASX listed peers on just about any valuation metric you like to look at. So the first reason is location. All our areas and our projects are in the northeast of South Australia, and South Australia ranks highly as a mining destination, in fact 7th in the world in a recent survey. It's a very low sovereign risk place. We have a long history of copper mining in the state and a very pro-mining government, which enforces Tier 1 ESG regulatory standards. And our projects are very favourably located with respect to the long history mining centre of Broken Hill, which has a skilled mining workforce because of that long history. And it's also transected by the National Highway and Railway. And within our tenement areas, we have 2 main copper regions. Firstly, the Curnamona Copper Belt, which lies to the north, which includes the large Kalkaroo resource. And in the Curnamona Copper Belt, we have this particular copper horizon, which is very prospective. In the south, we have the Mutooroo project area with the Mutooroo resource in its central part. The second reason is substantial JORC resource inventory, as I mentioned. Our flagship project is Kalkaroo, which positive independent pre-feasibility study back in 2019 confirmed it as one of the largest undeveloped open pit copper deposits in Australia. And that was based on a 100 million tonne ore reserve, 90% of which is proved. And that was at a very respectable copper equivalent grade of 0.89%. Our second project shown on the right is Mutooroo. It's much smaller, but a higher grade, 1.53% copper deposit, also with appreciable cobalt. And that has an open pit resource and then extends to depth potential underground. And that deposit has almost 200,000 tonnes of copper and over 20,000 tonnes of cobalt as JORC resources. So where are the projects at? Kalkaroo is well advanced. We're at the final permitting stage with the Mines Department. We're talking to financiers, mining contractors, plant construction contractors, and doing all the tasks that are required to get the project going in the first half of next year. Mutooroo is a bit behind. We're presently doing the PFS, pre-feasibility study, and we're currently doing more drilling to extend the resource a bit and compiling the mining lease proposal document. Now, I mentioned that Kalkaroo project, we're aiming to get that into production in the first half of next year. And to that end, we're starting with this small starter gold open pit, which is in the oxidised ore at the very western end of the deposit. This is the open pit design for the whole deposit, which is about 3 kilometres long. That mines the oxidised ore, the gold ore on the top, plus all the copper sulphide. But initially, we're going to start mining this pit and then progressively moving around and then moving to the much larger copper sulphide operation. This is the current layout for the starter pit with the overburden, the tailings and the processing plant here. Now, I mentioned upside as an important fourth reason, and the upside comes in a number of forms. On the left here, there's a skeleton picture of the Kalkaroo deposit, just the resource shells for the different ore types, the gold cap sitting on top with native copper zone, chalcocite, and then the primary chalcopyrite sulphide ore. Now, this ore body is, as I said before, is over 3 kilometres long. It's actually open both ends. It's open down plunge to the north, and the main fault zone is also open. And really, the shape you see there has been limited only by our drilling. So had we done more drilling, I think it would be a different shape, because the constraints have been on the where the drill holes are, which has defined the current ore. So had we been able to drill more holes, no doubt the shape would be different. Then in the immediate surrounding area, this is an aeromagnetic image. There's almost no outcrop in this area, so much of our drilling is guided by the aeromagnetics, which gives us almost like a skeleton view of the rocks underneath in the subsurface, beneath the sand clay cover. And this is the Kalkaroo ore body here. You recognise that distinctive boomerang shape. And we've gone out on to 3 other areas actually on geological hunches, and also a little bit of soil geochemistry, or at least drill hole geochemistry. And we've actually got 3 ore grade intercepts in 3 different areas, all within a few kilometres of Kalkaroo. So there's very good potential regionally in the near vicinity of Kalkaroo to find additional resources which could feed into a central mill here at Kalkaroo. And then still looking at the wider regional, the Kalkaroo deposit and the Kalkaroo dome, which I just showed, is there, but the mineralisation in this region, in this Curnamona Copper Belt, is confined to this particular stratigraphic horizon, which circles around these large domes, which are often cored by granite, or granite very nearby. And pretty well wherever one drills or encounters this prospective horizon, you find mineralisation, indications of copper, gold, moly, tungsten. And so it's naturally we call it the prospective horizon, and it's highly prospective, and no doubt we think many other potential discoveries to be made. In that sense, it's very similar to the Paterson province of northwestern Australia, Western Australia, which hosts such deposits as Telfer, Nifty, and more recent discoveries like Mutooroo and Havilah, which are a class of deposit. They're strata bound, but structurally controlled. And also very many similarities to the Central African Copper Belt, where most of mineralisation is structurally controlled, strata bound style. Associated with the copper gold mineralisation we find here are other metals like cobalt. Cobalt's ubiquitous. Similarly, moly, molybdenum, tungsten, and also rare earths are associated in many cases. There is negligible uranium, unlike some of the deposits in the Gawler Craton, and that means that we produce a clean uranium-free concentrate. It's actually a very favourable setting for major ore bodies to be discovered. All the elements are there, and Havilah owns this tenement block 100%. Further example of the upside, this time at Mutooroo, the Mutooroo deposit, which, as I mentioned, is a smaller deposit, lode style. And we've defined a measured resource, indicated and inferred. And this is our proposed open pit here within the measured resource at the southern end of Mutooroo. This is a long section, so it's a cut through the zone, but lengthwise rather than across it. And so we're currently drilling up in this area here, looking for additional resources that would allow us to extend this brown open pit here further north. Currently it has a 3 or 4 year mine life. We'd like to extend that to 5 to 7 before looking at going underground to mine the resources at depth. So there's quite good upside in this red rectangle area going down to 400 or 500 metres below the surface. But at the moment, we're just looking in this shallow top 100, 150 metres, looking for more shallow open pit. Also in the Mutooroo area, surrounding the main Mutooroo resource here, there are many other prospects. Some have been drilled historically. For example, at Kings Dam, Trinity, we've got economic grade copper drill intersections, but they've never been assayed for cobalt or gold. And many other promising drill intersections. We've drilled in this Wilkins area and got very good follow-up results. We've recently drilled at the Coburn prospect, which never been drilled before. It's just an outcrop in Gossan and got over 20 metres true width of 0.4 grams gold plus associated copper and cobalt. And it's got quite a long strike length, so plenty of potential upside. And even something like this with these comparatively low grades would be potentially a source of ore feed for a mill located here at Mutooroo. So our concept at Mutooroo really is to have start the processing on this current resource, build a plant here, and then truck in ore from other resources that we discover in the surrounding area. Out in this area, we have a lot of geochemical sampling, very anomalous copper, cobalt, and in some cases gold results, which we've never ever followed up. So it's an area with very high potential. And we think Mutooroo is just one of possibly a number of other deposits. Just turning to the metallurgy, also some upside, as I mentioned, in other metals. Very conventional processing, grinding, crushing, flotation, produces a nice copper sulphide concentrate. This is for both Kalkaroo and Mutooroo. Good recoveries of copper and quite nice grades. At Kalkaroo, as I mentioned, we have associated moly plus rare earths, and we're working on how to recover those. If one cleans up the tail from the copper concentrate, copper sulphide concentrate, you end up with a clean pyrite concentrate, which contains 0.3% cobalt, 2.5 gram gold, 1% copper. And we think this is potentially a valuable product as well as the copper concentrate, simply because there's gold and cobalt content and also sulfur. And that may be directly saleable, or it may be able to be treated on site to produce valuable products like gold, copper sulfate, and potentially sulfuric acid. So none of these other products have factored into any of our economic models for Kalkaroo, but there's certainly future upside and potential sources of additional revenue. And the fifth and important reason, as I said, for investors is Havilah's high leverage to copper. So these charts here on the right, which have been prepared independently by PCF Capital Group, show that Havilah has one of the highest leverages to copper based on its enterprise value divided by its either copper equivalent resources or its copper equivalent ore reserves. So Havilah, you can see, is right down here. It has a very low enterprise value versus its resources or versus its reserves. So in simple terms, what that means is $1 invested in Havilah will buy you more copper than $1 invested in any of the other of these companies. And that's why we say that Havilah has exceptionally high leverage to copper, one of the highest leverages to copper on the ASX, simply because $1 buys you more copper. So in summary, to invest in Havilah really is to invest in copper. And the reasons why you'd invest in Havilah, which I've just gone through, but I'll summarise here again, is the favourable logistics in northeast and South Australia, which is a tier 1 ESG mining destination and very low sovereign risk. Second reason is we have a 100 million tonne open pit copper gold ore reserve above about 200 metres depth at Kalkaroo, and we're planning to commence mine development there in the first half of 2022. So we're getting on with it. We have a large tenement holding with high exploration potential to expand resources and make new discoveries. And as I've just said, there are potential revenue drivers from other metals, for example, cobalt, rare earths, and molybdenum. And then final point is that on any valuation metric you like to use, Havilah has the highest leverage to copper amongst its ASX listed peers. And as a final mention, our management has a very serious intent to develop mines. We've in fact developed the nearby Portia gold mine, and that ran successfully before we sold it. And we're very incentivized to to get these projects going. We've been working on them for a long time, and we want to see them develop for the benefit of our shareholders. This page, we've summarised the mineral resources and JORC reserves, the cautionary statement, forward-looking statements, competent person. We have a dedicated copper webpage, so please visit that. A lot of useful information on it. And while you're there, subscribe to our mailing list. And in closing, thank you for the opportunity to share with you Havilah's copper credentials.